Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Sandeep. Have you ever tried explaining our kids, young teens, what is the value of money and how it is correlating to happiness or any of that sort of things? It will be a futile exercise or it will be not that effective exercise, trust me. We all have tried, we all know how difficult it is to teach young kids, especially, or even the college going kids. It's so difficult to explain the value of money. I mean, we try with many examples and all of that, but I had to really rely on one of the letter I found written by Benjamin Franklin, which was a letter written by Benjamin Franklin to his friend, Madame Brylan, in 1779, 250 years back. Benjamin Franklin, we all know, has been the founding father of United States and also was an American polymath, author, a multi-talented personality. He's written a lot of every year book called Poor Richard's Almanac, which was a compilation of all his wisdom. And this letter really helps us teach kids or young teens or even youngsters for that matter in 20s the value of money and what really price means and what how it correlates with the happiness factor. And here it goes. Benjamin Franklin was 7 years old when he was given a few coppers by his parents. He was coming from a large family. He didn't have that rich livelihood, so it was not a usual thing. So with great happiness, he rushed to the toy store with those coppers to buy something in exchange. And he, on his way, found an interesting sound from a whistle played by a boy. And he gave all the coppers that he had in exchange for that whistle, which intrigued him a lot. And he brought this whistle back home and explained the story. And his parents were very upset and they told him, he paid too much for this whistle. And he was thoroughly upset, Benjamin Franklin, and he recollected this whole experience in his letter to his friend. And I'm going to read out this letter and bring out some finer nuances and finer points, which might be very useful in teaching kids and youngsters about the value of money and happiness. Here it goes. So this is the letter I have put here. What we need to teach kids, teens, the value of money and happiness. Really, I mean that's Benjamin Franklin's The Whistle. So I have put the letter here. I'm not going to read out all. I'm just going to take succinct points and explain what I did use on the right side with my red points. So there are 4 to 5 key points we need to take away on this, which we can teach kids to start with. First one, he says, he starts a letter like, in my opinion, we might all draw more good from it than we do and suffer less evil if we would take care not to give too much for whistles. For to me, it seems that most of the unhappy people we meet with are become so by neglect of that caution. So he says there is good, more good and less evil if you really understand the value of things and what we are paying for. So everything in the world has a value at a price and a price for the value. So we need to first note that. Second important point we can teach is like, then he goes explaining in the letter about the whole incident, what I quoted in the starting of the video about he taking that whistle for a lot of coppers. Then he says when he reached home, when his parents and his cousins laughed at him that he paid too much, he made a folly. Then he cried with vexation, and the reflection gave him more chagrin than the whistle gave him pleasure at all. So sometimes this happens when we really long to buy things, materialistic things, and we feel the joy of procuring possessing that materialistic thing not beyond 6 months or 1 year. After that it becomes yet another thing. It loses its that differentiating factor in our minds. So that's what instant gratification does. Now this however was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on my mind, so that often when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary thing, I said to myself, don't give too much for the whistle, and I saved my money. So he talks about savings here, the importance of savings. So, and he's saying like, do not, even if you're tempted to buy unnecessary things, do not pay for it because it's not worth it. Instead, save that money. So this is comparative to the materialistic things we are often tempted to buy. I deduced another thing for investors here, which is a margin of safety, which Benjamin Graham had propagated. And lesson for investors is do not overpay for stocks, however good the company is. So we might be tempted to buy stocks, especially during raging bull markets, at way too higher price, but we will repent for that action for many years after that. So do not overpay for the any company, however good the case is, however great the business is. So that's a lesson. Then he goes on to say, as I grew up, came into the world, and observed actions of men, I thought I met with many, very many, who gave too much for the whistle. Now he goes to explain about the life lessons after talking about savings and not paying excess for the materialistic possessions. Now he talks about he saw many people in the world doing many things out of the way to not understanding the value of things. So first case he talks about is work. So he talks about when I saw one too ambitious of court favor, sacrificing his time in attendance on leaves, his repose, his liberty, his virtue, perhaps his friends to attain it. I have said to myself, this man gives too much for his whistle. So do not stress yourself too much for work, and don't go out of your way to about your career work, because end of the day you are replaceable, and give importance and have a balance across the work and life. So that's what he talks about here. Then the last paragraph in this page is, if I knew a miser who gave up every kind of comfortable living, all the pleasures of doing good to others, all the esteem of his fellow citizens, enjoy and the joys of benevolent friendship, for the sake of accumulating wealth. Poor man, said I, you pay too much for your whistle. So here he talks about miser. Never be a miser. In the previous page we saw he talks about being a good saver, and here he's talking about be a good saver but don't be a miser at the same time. So there is a fundamental difference between being frugal and being miser. And what is frugality? It is a way of living where you differentiate between what you actually need and what you just want, and you give prioritize that. Whereas on the other hand, a miser compromise even what you actually need and want, and even if they can afford it. So that is a difference. So people who are misers generally, they don't even uh, pay for the things they need badly. Sacrificing such level of misery and creating wealth is of no use. And they don't do good to others as well, not being benevolent, for joys of benevolent friendship, and paying, giving up too much for the wealth is not worth it. Then comes a point where he talks about, when I met with a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or his fortune to mere corporal sensations, and ruining his health in their pursuit. Mistaken man, said I, you are providing pain for yourself instead of pleasure. You give too much for your whistle. Again, having a life which is completely in the pursuit of corporal sensation and physical pleasures and emotional pleasures is not really worth it. Instead, he says prioritize continuous growth and improvement of physical, emotional, and spiritual being over worldly pleasures. So self development, personal mastery takes priority than all other materialistic pleasures. Then he goes about saying, if I see one fond of appearance of fine clothes, fine houses, fine furnitures, fine equipages, all above his fortune, for which he contracts debts and hence his career in a prison, alas, I say, he has paid dear, very dear for his whistle. So he says this is about, acquiring and possessing too many materialistic things. This is something which we need to teach our kids first lesson, like living within your means, and never stretch beyond the means to possess materialistic things to satisfy others, to satisfy and get the social validations. Living for the society, that is the popular dogma we should avoid. And even worse is taking debt to do that. Taking debt beyond your means to possess things, materialistic things, to please others is a very bad idea, and it's the surest way to disaster. So debt is a very bad route if you want to really do that. And that's what he emphasizes on, and this is something we really need to teach youngsters and kids. And finally, he says, when I see a beautiful, sweet tempered girl married to an ill natured brood of a husband, he says, what a pity, say I, that she should pay so much for a whistle. Now, here is a reversal of the thought where he says, never underestimate your value. And he says, understand your value, try not to settle for less than what you deserve, never do that. So you should understand the value of ourselves and the price what it demands, and never undersettle for any of our what we deserve. And in short, he says, he concisely ends it saying, like, I conceive that great part of the miseries of mankind are brought upon them by false estimates they are made of the value of things, and by their giving too much for their vessels. So understand the value of things, whether it is how much you have to give for work, how much you have to spend for career, how much you have to balance in life, how much you have to save, how much you can never be a miser. and how much you have to value the friendship, giving importance of personal mastery and emotional well-being. All of that is important. It should be a well-balanced life, and you need to avoid many of the things he spoke about to avoid mysteries in life. Now, I also deduced something very important from this whole letter, which is my personal thought. I deduced that time is the most valuable asset in your life. So if you have to really understand the value of things, which is what this letter talks about, we should teach our kids also and youngsters also the most valuable asset in the life, which is time, which is running out on a daily basis, minute by minute, and that is the most valuable asset. And many often, most of us run on a way that we take uh, time for granted. We think that there is unlimited time for us, and we seldom realize the fact that time is the most valuable asset. We should really understand the value of time if at all we really do something from this letter. So I would quote that with Steve Jobs statement from his famous speech, celebrated speech, which he did in Stanford, and he ends the speech like, your time is limited, don't waste it living someone else's life. And I will also want to bring one quote from legendary investor Warren Buffett. From an investing standpoint, what we can take from this letter is he succinctly summarizes what he learned from his guru Benjamin Graham, that is, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And that's so profound. Even today, even 50 years later, we buy things, even from investing standpoint, we should really assess and weigh in the price and value, and really understand how much we are paying. We should not pay too much price for the value, especially when we are carried away by the vagaries of emotions, and which is influenced by fear and greed. So let me end there with two powerful quotes from two legendary people, and hope this was helpful. Thanks for staying with me.